The air in the town of Villeneuve was thick with fear, as if the very stones of the streets knew the evil that walked among the living. Shadows clung to the corners of alleys, long and unnatural, and no bird dared perch upon the rooftops. Mothers drew their children close, whispering prayers under trembling breaths, while fathers shut themselves behind doors, gripping wooden staffs and old iron knives that were useless against the true power at hand. For the Inquisition had arrived. It was the year of our Lord 1347, when the Black Death had not yet reached these parts, but another scourge moved quietly, invisibly, cloaked in black robes and the authority of God. The Inquisitors came with scrolls, seals, and a certainty that their judgment was righteous, their will absolute. They were men without mercy, appointed to hunt heresy, to cleanse the soul of sin with fire, cord, and iron. Their names were spoken only in fear. Father Conrad, Brother Guillaume, and the shadow behind them, the torturer known simply as the Master of the Wheel. Villeneuve had long whispered among themselves of those who did not attend Mass, who muttered words to the night, who dared to question the teachings handed down from Rome. But it was not enough to whisper in fear. The Inquisition demanded certainty, confession, and blood. The first to fall was old Mariette, the healer. She was known for her knowledge of herbs and strange remedies, and for that alone, suspicion had festered like a wound. One morning, the town awoke to find her shack surrounded by black-robed figures. They dragged her to the square, where a fire burned too high, smoke curling like the fingers of the damned. Her hands were bound, her mouth gagged, and yet she stared at the crowd with eyes that dared to see through their lies. The Inquisitors demanded her confession. Mariette said nothing, only shaking her head, the veins in her temple pulsing with fear and defiance alike. Father Conrad pressed a finger to her forehead and hissed the words of excommunication, a spell of damnation he believed would bend her soul to God's will. When she remained silent, the Master of the Wheel stepped forward. His hands were cruel and skilled, instruments of pain honed over decades. The wheel stood in the square, a device of unimaginable torment, iron-bound and spiked. The crowd turned away, some to pray, others to weep, but all to witness, for this was justice according to the Church. Mariette was forced upon the wheel. The spokes twisted her limbs, the ropes pulled taut, and with every agonized scream, she denied the accusations. Some say she cursed the Inquisitors in her last breath, calling forth pestilence upon their souls. The fire took her afterward, leaving nothing but ashes and the lingering odor of burning flesh. Villeneuve did not rejoice. They only trembled, for they knew that her death was the beginning, not the end. Soon the Inquisitors roamed from home to home. They were relentless. They searched cellars and attics, opened locked chests, and read letters. Every refusal to comply was heresy, and every heresy demanded penance or death. Children watched their fathers dragged away, mothers torn from beds in the dead of night, their cries muffled by the walls of stone and the iron doors of the Inquisitors' chambers. The Master of the Wheel showed no mercy. He knew the body could break the mind, and the mind could break the soul, and for that he had been trained. Those who confessed too late were punished beyond imagination. One evening, the townspeople gathered in whispers around the only candle still lit in the square. They spoke of a man named Etienne, a scholar who had dared question the doctrines in the Church, who had written forbidden words in ink that smelled of brimstone and despair. He was hidden in the lofts of Villeneuve, protected by neighbors too fearful to speak. But fear alone cannot hide a man from those who listen to the winds of sin. The Inquisitors found him. They carried him before the square, and the Master of the Wheel examined his fingers, twisting each one until they cracked, until the scholar's eyes rolled in agony. He begged for mercy, for death, for anything, but the inquisitors were deaf to human plea. Etienne refused to renounce his writings, and so the inquisitors marked him. They burned his fingers first, then bound him to the rack, pulling his body until the sinews groaned and blood dripped to the floor. And yet he refused to cry the words they demanded. The crowd looked on, some vomiting, some fainting, others simply weeping. For it was not just the pain of Etienne that haunted them, it was the certainty that any of them could be next. The inquisitors moved like shadows through the village. Night brought no comfort. Children whispered of figures outside their windows, cloaked in black, moving silently over the cobblestones. Windows shuttered, doors barred, but none were safe. Even the parish priest trembled as Father Conrad approached, demanding lists of heretics, questioning his sermons, challenging the sanctity of his own conscience. A single refusal could summon the master of the wheel, and no one survived his attention unscathed. And then came the whispers of the fire. Villeneuve had a small forge, a blacksmith's den, where sparks flew day and night. One night, the inquisitors set it ablaze with accused heretics inside. The screams tore through the village like a banshee's cry. Men who had hidden children under beds were forced to watch. Women who had prayed in secret were forced to carry the kindling. Smoke choked the streets, and when the fire finally died, only smoldering ruins remained. And yet, the inquisitors said it was righteous. God had been served. There were stories of those who went mad. Henri, a carpenter, refused to answer the summons of the inquisitors. Yet one night he awoke to the sound of nails being driven into wood in the darkness. He swore he saw black-robed figures moving through the walls of his home, their faces hidden beneath hoods, carrying iron chains. He tried to flee, but the village had no escape. Every street, every path, led him back to the square where the wheel and the fire waited. He was never seen again. Some say he ran into the forest and was claimed by wolves. Others whisper that he was taken by the inquisitors themselves, and that even in death, his soul is chained to the square, tormented by the cries of the damned. The inquisitors did not limit themselves to Villeneuve alone. Neighboring towns reported similar horrors. Families disappeared in the night, homes burned with the guilty and innocent alike, and no one dared speak out. Rumors spread of secret cells beneath the cathedrals, where heretics were tortured, where screams echoed endlessly against stone walls, and where the inquisitors' prayers were a song to their cruelty rather than to God. It was said that the master of the wheel kept a ledger of souls, marking each sinner with meticulous care, his pen dripping ink as if it were blood. One stormy night, lightning struck the bell tower, sending a shard of stone crashing to the square below. The inquisitors saw it as an omen, a warning from heaven. Yet the villagers saw it differently. In the darkness, a shadow moved, perhaps a spirit, perhaps a figment of their terror. But the inquisitors were found the next morning dead in the square, their robes shredded, their instruments of torture twisted and bent. Some claimed it was the wrath of the dead heretics. Others whispered that God's judgment had finally turned on the hunters themselves. For weeks, Villeneuve remained silent. The square was empty. The wheel rusted in the sun, and the forge had cooled. No inquisitor dared return. Yet the terror did not leave the town. Mothers still drew their children close. Fathers still gripped iron knives in the dark, and at night, when the wind moved through the alleys, it sounded like the whispered prayers of the damned, the cries of tortured souls, and the shadow of a hooded figure moving silently along the cobblestones. Villeneuve became a place of cautionary tales. Travelers spoke of it in hushed tones, warning each other of the black robes, the wheel, the fires, and the unseen presence that had once ruled the village. The villagers themselves never truly recovered. Sleep was fleeting. Shadows lingered longer than they should. Doors slammed without wind, and in the darkest corners of the square, some swore they could see a faint outline, a hooded figure, forever bent over a ledger, counting the souls of the guilty and the innocent alike. The Inquisition had passed, but its mark remained. It was a lesson carved into flesh, fire, and stone. No place, no home, no mind was safe from the eyes of men who claimed the will of God. Villeneuve endured, generations later, but even centuries hence, when scholars and priests visited the ruined square, they felt a chill in their bones, heard whispers where no one stood, and glimpsed the shadow of a wheel turning slowly, grinding endlessly, as if the horror of that age had never ceased.